What was the cruelest thing you have done to a sim in The Sims? Please consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. Here's the copy pasta where the guy set up a maze to the front door of his sim's house, so his sim would leave for work every morning, come home after work, but it took him so long to get through the maze. As soon as he got home he had to leave for work again the next morning, for eternity. The guy never get to spend a second at home. The game is called Sim Survivor. You make a house of 8 individuals, build them a spacious house, truck them all in, delete the doors, build fireplaces on every wall, have the Sims light them, build plants all over the house. Essentially every square foot where there isn't a Sim, the place goes up like a tinder box. The Sims then have to put out every fire. Usually you lose about 5 or 6 of them to the blaze. Then the final few must clean up the piles of ash around the house. Here is where you lose a couple to exhaustion. The winner gets a beautiful house with a big graveyard in the backyard for them to go and mourn their buds. I tried to make a utopia where everyone would be happy and playful in the forest. The only thing I provided was a toilet on one segment of plain wall, a fridge, and lots of trees. It was a disaster. People peed everywhere and were hungry. I remember in Sims 2 once your Sim died you could move their tombstone to a public place. So I created a park with tons of trees to make it look spooky. Then I made a household with the max amount of Sims, like 7 or 8, and killed them all by using those cheats to spawn meteors. I then moved all their tombstones to the said spooky park. I did that about 3 times until the park was full of tombstones and I would force other Sims there at night to have to get spooked by the ghosts. Another time I put a baby in a crib and built 4 or 5 layers of fences and walls around it, then set it on fire. This was to see if the social worker would get stuck. Turns out the social workers in Sims can walk through walls and babies can't die. Once made a normal Sim and went about his natural life. Everything was completely normal except he always hated this one other Sim. Every time they met up there'd be an argument or fight. They loathed each other with a passion. Time went on and the two grew old. I noticed the nemesis had a family while my Sim never married, so I tracked down his granddaughter, convinced her to move in, along with his nemesis, and trapped him in a small room next to their bedroom. I put up a full wall mirror, to simulate a one-way mirror, and my Sim spent the rest of his life making woohoo with his enemy's granddaughter while he watched from the next room. I had an actual torture dungeon in my house. Stone walls, no chairs or beds, no toilet, no door. One wall was entirely window, and the nice posh room it faced had comfy chairs for the rest of the family to watch as the prisoner repeatedly soiled themselves and lived in squalor. On The Sims 4 I had a process of getting free houses, move in with someone then evict them. At first I didn't know I could evict them, so I decided to lock the inhabitants in a shed and leave them to starve to death. It was a husband and wife. I gave them one chair, no bathroom, and a radio that played the same song over and over again. Then I let them starve to death while peeing the floor and crying. My wife and I were sharing a computer playing our own saves and both of us created Sims of the other. She died at a pool party, an accident. So I sold her headstone for a few simoleons. She still gives me shit about it. I made my Sim a sugar baby who turned into a black widow. She'd meet men at the club, bring them home and get it on. Then she'd visit their house later and, thanks to the kleptomania tray, just take a bunch of their stuff, then go home and sell it to make rent. Eventually she moved in with a rich sugar daddy and made him break it off with his wife and kick her out. Then the sugar daddy mysteriously died. Someone walled over his bedroom door while he was sleeping and he starved to death. And she inherited all his property. She went from whore to socialite in like 2 in-game months. The social worker continued taking away my children so I locked the crib in a 2x1 room until the child hatched. Problem is that I forgot to open the room and welcome the child into the family. My 7th grade English teacher told me he had created a replica of our class in The Sims and removed all the doors to see who really was the strongest student. I didn't use the rosebud/motherlode cheats and made those frikers go to work every day. Then I wasted their money on dumb shit, like a fancy espresso machine and made them sleep on the floor. Picked some Sims walking by my house to trap in a 1x1 square room so I could hang out with the Grim Reaper when they die. Instead of cheating for money, I played the game with honor. I would custom create a spouse for my person, marry them, then have them electrocute themselves repairing the TV, all for the $20,000. I was addicted to The Sims and my husband occasionally plays the game, so he made a Sims family in my game. As a joke, I dressed them all up as hot dogs. He doesn't play often and I forgot about his Sims in the game. I turned the aging on in the game and all but one of his Sims had died of old age. She was still living in the same house he had put her in and was being mercilessly haunted by the hot dog ghosts of her dead family members. I once made a huge frat house, all had the bro tray, with max sims you can put in a family. 8 I think, sent one into town to befriend a bunch of people, and then had a huge party with all those guests. I think the max guest amount is 15, so total 23 sims in the house. Then I deleted the doors once everyone arrived and let it fast forward. For days. I lost count on the days. I feel like it was a week, but I know 4 sims died in the fire after one of my sims tried to grill. It was a rager for sure. The guests were congregating where the front door used to be, repeatedly peeing themselves and falling asleep in their own puddle of urine. My sims would try to sleep in their bed, but guests would wake them up after a short amount of time. I decided to run a MasterChef-style challenge with a household of 7 sims and Gordon Ramsay. The sims would partake in various cooking challenges with Gordon presiding as the judge. However, whenever someone got eliminated, I'd have Gordon lure the poor sim to the back of the lot and stab them to death. Sims mods are great. It continued until only one chef was left alive, and then as victory I'd have them kill Gordon and then themselves. It was glorious. The premise was this. Gloria Benning, a sexy and single entrepreneur, moved into the home and neighborhood of her dreams. Even though she technically couldn't afford the rent, the landlord however offered to lower the rent, so long as his deranged and homeless uncle, Moose Carnegie, could live in the tool shed out back. Thinking herself a charitable soul, Gloria accepted. I'm unsure how cruel it is, but holy shit did my brother and I have fun taking turns playing as Moose when Gloria went off to work to screw around in her house. It was required that whenever Moose snuck in we had to say now it's my turn to be Miss Benin, leave messes for her to clean up, start fires, rock out to industrial techno, etc. I have run household where every generation had one sim die a bizarre death, while everyone else died from old age, until I got to a single child whose parents focused and maxed their career before having a baby. So they ended up becoming elderly by the time their child became a teenager, and they died a day after she returned from university. So I now have this young woman who is already down near the top of her career, who just wants to find love, but the ghosts of her family keep scaring away her lovers living in a big empty mansion with a private cemetery in the backyard. I have another sim whose parents are swingers and they keep stealing his girlfriends, one of whom got pregnant but they gave the baby up for adoption. He's a bit of a nerd and wants to work in the paranormal field, so maybe I'll get him Andy the rich girl to hook up. Once I had these sims, they were married and then the dude cheated on her and they did it in their bed. She walked in on them and they divorced, but then he and the girl he cheated on her with got married and she had to cater the wedding and do clean up. Sims 3 picked the hydrophobic tray and then instead of doors, rooms were connected by small pools. He had to face his fears every single time he wanted to change room. In Sims Medieval I would actively make my sim jump into the monster pit. I had a normal suburban family, nice house, 2 kids, the works, except they also had a secret child they kept locked in a room in the basement with nothing but a sink. They only ever visited him to bring him a plate of old terrible food once in a while and to make fun of him and taunt him. Eventually, the kid's sink broke and kept flooding the room. Since he was a kid, he couldn't repair the sink, so it just kept flooding. The kid spent all his time mopping up a never-ending spill and crying. In The Sims 2 I had a couple who was able to live forever. He was a paranormal investigator and she was a biologist. Through their careers, they got items that allowed them to raise the dead and grow a plant that produced life-giving milk if it ate other Sims. They tricked another guy in the neighborhood to come live with them. He would get eaten by the plant and then raised as a zombie again and again so the couple could stay eternally young. I used to make characters with very specific real-life personas and disregard their needs in favor of it. I made a gamer who only ordered food, never showered, and lost their job consistently for not going and would lock them in their room to game and sleep. Hardest one was making a long-con thief. They had no job, but would throw house parties nearly nightly to seduce their neighbors. When they got married I'd move to the other person's property and sell all their stuff before killing their spouse, locking them in a room with a stove, removing doors on a room, then would move back to their old and expensive property and deck it out with their money. Last I did was a dysfunctional family, where the wife cheated with a rich neighbor and the husband had a secret homosexual relationship. All the meanwhile they neglected their kids and fought a lot. I like depressing scenarios when I play The Sims because I like the drama that evolves. My younger brother and I used to watch a whole bunch of Sims videos and the funniest part for us was when the Grim Reaper would appear. So naturally when we got the game, my brother and I set up a death house. Some people were closed in a closet while the house burnt down, others were locked in a shed that was then submerged in water. It was some quality brother bonding, you know. I created colleges with degrees in things like cooking and art history. Then I built ridiculously expensive homes. When all my Sims reached adulthood, they graduated the colleges with worthless degrees and huge student loans and couldn't afford the houses. In the roller coaster PC game, I would put no entry signs at the park exits and not build bathrooms so they'd be trapped and unable to pee. Everything else was just making crazy roller coaster crashes or dropping people in lakes or pits for not enjoying rides I built. Not The Sims, but on the Guild Renaissance tour, which is basically The Sims but in the Renaissance. I started the game as a baker or something like that, and found out it sucked balls. So I married my guy to a very smart woman that started her career in politics. She had a daughter which also studied a lot and became a politician. When my guy was old, I used the political influence of his wife and daughter. The wife was governor and the daughter had another high-ranking office, to make my character judge. So in the guild you have rival families, and I had a family that was pissing me off. Don't remember in which way, so I accused a woman from a rival family of being a thief or something like that. And since each politician has influence during the trial, I ended up sentencing her to death. Now, some months before, a young man of that same family had petitioned to a position in the local government, so I had given to him the position of town executioner and he had to carry out the execution. He happened to be the woman's son. I deleted the pool as soon as he jumped from the diving board. I made this woman that was very attractive and she got married to this guy that was very lonely. I made her a whore and have kids from different Sims, so this guy ends up raising other men's kids and his wife divorces him. Please subscribe if you like the video. It really helps the channel to grow. Adios.